At the family reunion, my uncle said, "Isn't it time we controlled our women properly?" The potato salad fell from my hands and splattered across Aunt Catherine's white carpet, while everyone stared at Uncle Frank like he'd grown a second head. "I'm serious," he continued, setting down his beer and looking around the living room at the 23 family members gathered for Grandma's 85th birthday. "Look at the divorce rates. Look at society falling apart. It's because we stopped keeping women in their proper place." My cousin Lisa's mouth dropped open, and her new boyfriend shifted uncomfortably on the couch, while my mother gripped her wine glass so tight I thought it might shatter. "Frank, what the hell are you talking about?" My dad stood up from his recliner, his face already turning red the way it did when someone cut him off in traffic. But Uncle Frank wasn't backing down. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through something, his face lit by the blue glow. "I've been reading about this online. There's a whole movement of men who understand what went wrong. Women got too much freedom, and now look where we are." He turned the phone toward us, showing some website with bold red text about reclaiming masculine authority and natural hierarchy. My 16-year-old daughter Megan was sitting next to me on the love seat, and I felt her whole body tense up. She'd been excited about this reunion, her first time seeing the extended family since before COVID, and now Uncle Frank was ruining everything with whatever rabbit hole he'd fallen down on the internet. "Uncle Frank," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Maybe this isn't the time or place for this conversation," but he turned those intense gray eyes on me, the same eyes that used to scare me as a kid when he'd babysit. "This is exactly the time, Jennifer. You're divorced, aren't you? And why? Because society told you that you didn't need to submit to your husband's authority." The room went silent except for the sound of Grandma's oxygen tank humming in the corner. She was watching everything unfold with those sharp blue eyes that missed nothing despite her age. My ex-husband Nathan had cheated on me with his secretary for 2 years, but apparently Uncle Frank had his own interpretation of events. "Now wait just a minute," Aunt Catherine started, but Frank held up his hand to silence her. The gesture was so dismissive, so casual, that it took everyone a second to process what had just happened. Catherine had been married to Frank for 37 years, had raised 4 kids with him, had her own successful real estate business, and he'd just dismissed her like a child interrupting adult conversation. "I'm talking, Catherine. You can speak when I'm finished." The transformation in Aunt Catherine's face was something I'll never forget. All the color drained out, then flooded back in a wave of fury that made her look 20 years younger. But before she could respond, Frank's oldest son Michael stood up. At 28, Michael was the golden child who'd followed in Frank's footsteps as an engineer, and everyone expected him to defend his mother. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Dad's got a point, actually. I've been reading the same stuff. Society has gotten too soft." Lisa threw her napkin on the coffee table and stood up so fast she knocked over her soda. "Are you both insane? This is 2024, not 1824. But Michael just smiled, that condescending smile I remembered from when we were kids, and he'd explain why girls couldn't play certain games. "That's exactly the problem, Lisa. We've let emotional thinking replace logic. Women are naturally more emotional, more nurturing. They're happiest when they have strong male leadership." "I have a PhD in biochemistry," Lisa shouted, her voice cracking with disbelief. "I run a research lab with 40 employees." Michael shrugged like this was irrelevant. "And are you happy? Are you married? Do you have kids?" The questions hung in the air like poison gas, and I watched Lisa's face crumble. She was 32, dedicated to her career, and these were clearly sore spots that Michael knew exactly how to press. Grandma's cough cut through the tension, rough and wet, the kind that had been getting worse despite the oxygen. Everyone turned to look at her, expecting her to need water or medicine, but instead, she was laughing. Actually laughing, though it sounded more like a wheeze. "Frank, you always were an idiot," she managed between coughs, "just like your father." The room went silent again because Grandpa had been dead for 15 years and was generally remembered as a saint. "Mother, you don't understand what's happening in society today," Frank started, but Grandma waved him off with one wrinkled hand. "I understand plenty. Your father tried the same nonsense in 1973. Had a whole group of his drinking buddies convinced they needed to reclaim their households. You know what happened?" She paused for another coughing fit, and Catherine brought her water. "I left him for 6 months. Took you kids to my sister's in Portland." This was news to everyone. The family story had always been that Grandma took a long vacation to help her sick sister, but now the truth was spilling out in this living room that suddenly felt too small for all of us. He learned real quick that he couldn't even operate the washing machine without me. Burned every meal. You kids were begging me to come back within 2 weeks. Frank's face was turning purple, but Grandma wasn't done. "When I came back, things were different. Equal. The way marriage should be." She looked directly at Catherine. "Don't you dare let him talk to you that way. Not in my presence. Not anywhere." Catherine straightened her spine and looked at Frank with something I'd never seen in her eyes before. It wasn't anger exactly. More like she was seeing him clearly for the first time in decades. But Frank wasn't ready to back down. He stood up, all 6'3" of him, towering over Grandma's wheelchair. The rest of the story is on my channel or linked below.